Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I figured I'd come here and ask a few questions involving a weird report I'm going through. I've exhausted literally every resource I can think of, so here I am. I'm actually an officer with a branch of the US Navy that I'm not going to specify, mostly so I can stay out of any more trouble with the higher-ups. I recently gave one of our frigates some rotten numbers, and that ended up wasting a lot of resources and time. I guess I should have paid more attention to my math, but I'm not going to go into it because it's not important. I'm going to dumb this shit down really well, so you all can get a clear picture, and I'd like to know if any of you have heard of anything like this happening. So, they've got me locked up here on shore in a tiny office with no windows, going through some backed up reports from one of our dive teams and trying to make sense of it. They're not demolitions or seals or anything, just a recon unit they mopped together. Good guys, really. I even know two of them personally, and they've both backed up the story. But it's an old case that they can't seem to make sense of, and the new administration is really pushing for answers on like every penny we spend. This happened in the early 2000s. Yes, I can't specify the date either. Our guys were off the coast of Yokosuka. Something popped up on one of our sub's sonar, but it had faded in and out of sonar contact, and it was moving extremely slowly. They probably thought it was a piece of debris, given the fact that we couldn't get a solid lock on it, which makes me believe that it wasn't all metal like a Chinese or Russian sub or something, nor was it big enough to constitute an enemy sub. Furthermore, it was only like 30 meters down, and it was maintaining that level. Still, some admiral had a bitch fit about it, with good reason, mind you, and we sent our dive team to ID it and possibly drag it out later if it was some kind of dangerous material or something. When the dive team came up on the big bastard, they said it was about 30 meters across and 20 or 25 high. There was a considerable amount of moss tangled into it, and some old rope and chains and gunk hanging down. One guy told me he saw, like, a harpoon in it, but they didn't get too close because they thought it could have been an old derelict mine. That bothered me because mines don't tend to float around like that, and it was really staying in the same place despite the currents. They tell me that it was moving around a bit, but I'm going to chalk that up to all the seaweed and gunk stuck on it. Well, in the report, they say that one of the younger guys got a little closer to take a picture, probably about 20 or 15 meters, which is too close for comfort if we're dealing with a mine. I feel like they made up the mine thing to cover for the fact that it creeped them the hell out, but I'm not going to judge them. Well, this guy gets real close and starts hitting it with a flashlight. He reported that he saw a sort of scaly metallic material underneath the barnacles and gunk. When the beam reached the front of this thing, the front in terms of the direction it was moving, if this thing even had a front, he tells me that the lower part of the front was moving up and down, sort of like a fish moving its mouth. I think you know where I'm going with this, but hear me out because it gets really weird. So they were under the impression that this was some kind of wayward junk floating around, like there was some kind of metal cage or something around it. One of the older guys gets the bright idea to go underneath it to identify the rope and chains, and he says in his report that they were really old, like before we had old metal ships. Sounds like bullshit to me because I don't know how he'd know that, but I'm gonna humor him. He says that he starts making out that this thing is some large pipe or something that's curled up into a bunch of knots. Like imagine one of those slinky toys, except really tangled, and the wire is really fat and worm-like. This is where it gets really strange. He says that while it was all curled up in a big ball, it was also moving around within itself, like it was powered by something or whatever, by which he probably means alive given what happened next. The unit leader identified several moving things on the rear and top of the object, and he immediately knew that they were whale lice. If you don't know what these creepy little things are, just Google it. Actually, never mind, I have a picture. Anyway, dude says it's got multiple whale lice attached to it, but they're much bigger than normal given that he could see them from 10 or 15 meters out with a flashlight. I'd say that makes them about a foot or two each, which would constitute a new species because I don't know anything about any goddamn giant whale lice. Anyway, back to the young guy. He's playing with the flashlight, beaming it all over the thing when it begins to move erratically. It tightens up and shrinks a bit, and then expands out a lot. The team scattered and regrouped behind it, and then observed as it began to unwind a bit and jolt back and forth left and right. This is where I began to scratch my head because I have no idea what could have done this. The team falls back about 20 meters and observes. They say it began moving around all over the place, and they were afraid that it might swim up and run right into them. The unit leader was a tough SOB, though, and he just kept watching, and he swears on his life that there was something sucking off the weird whale lice at the end of the tube. The team extracted due to depleting oxygen, but we kept tabs on it from an observation boat. It took a good 12 hours to prepare another team. They were briefed on what they were dealing with, and 2 members of this next 5-man team were given underwater rifles. They're like sort of harpoon guns that look like AKs, except full of several small harpoon projectiles. This time they go under and find it way further down, like 50 or 60 meters down. They decided they weren't going down for that shit because it would literally kill them, so the unit leader, like a dumbass, okays them to fire 1 or 2 rounds at it. The team backs up, the 2 gunners take aim, and one at a time they fire several shots at it. Only 1 shot hit, though. You try shooting something that far down underwater and see how accurate you get. And it only really grazed the thing because the gunner who hit it reported that he saw it fall after the hit, but there was definitively blood after the hit. The unit leader reported that the thing then began stretching itself out. It actually completely unfurled itself and revealed itself to be this long, sort of earthworm-looking thing. Then out of nowhere, it guns it straight at the dive team. The second gunner actually lost a fin when it came by. The fin is stored in an evidence locker in the base I'm at, and the teeth marks are the weirdest fucking shit I've ever seen. The fin looked like it had been shredded by razors. I couldn't even count the number of teeth marks, and it looked like this thing had multiple rows. Surprisingly, it didn't take the guy with him, and it ripped straight through his fin like butter. These things are made of some pretty tough plastic, so I'm surprised. Unit leader said that it was like a miniature subway train had gone right by them, and it almost knocked his hose loose. The unit leader said that it unfurled in about 3 seconds and then spun around in the water first, presumably gaining momentum, and then launched itself straight at them. I'm unaware of any underwater creatures that can do this or have the ability to immediately launch themselves at targets so accurately from such a long distance. The 5 of them watched it go straight up, and the observation boat said that they witnessed part of some long tube roll at the top of the water. It kept rolling until one little tiny tip at the end went straight down into the water. The team moved out of the way and it shot straight past them, banking flatly and slowly descending. It left their sight after about 40 seconds, and the report explains that it may have been like 100 yards long, give or take, maybe longer.
Reminds me of the times I've been diving off the coast of countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, etc. Never seen anything too crazy, but I've had my fair share of, well, that's a shark if I've ever seen one. I think the only 2 spooky, as in unexplained, because encountering a big-ass shark when it was nighttime was spooky, but I'm not including those. Events I had was 1. I once saw something swimming far in the distance whilst underwater, and then I immediately felt this kind of roar. I guess like a shockwave? I don't know. If you've ever heard a lion roar at the zoo, like that, but underwater and not quite as loud. 2. Saw a very large unidentified fish or something swim by me. I've seen plenty of sharks, swordfish, sunfish, everything. It definitely wasn't any of those. Could have just been misidentification, but it definitely was not a shark. The shape wasn't close to any shark I've seen. Was probably 9 to 10 feet in length. Otherwise, pretty average. The ocean is so tranquil. Diving in these absolutely beautiful blue oceans with the exotic, gracious fish and the sponges and corals. 10 out of 10 would recommend everyone try it at least once if they could save up for it.
I was stationed on the naval base in Bahrain. In the barracks I was in, there was a murder, attempted self-termination that happened probably 10 to 15 years before I got there. On my hallway, there were bleach footsteps on the carpet, and I never questioned why they were there. One day, I'm talking to my chief, and I mentioned that I would get a weird vibe sometimes at night. When I went out in the hallway to go to the ice machine, and he told me about the murder, attempted self-termination because he was stationed in Bahrain for the 2nd time, his first time being at the same time as the murder. Apparently, one of the base police officers went on his lunch break with his M16 and went to his girlfriend's room where he found her naked with another officer. He then killed both of them, covered the room in bleach, and walked back to his room before shooting himself in the head, but surviving. Anyway, a couple days after he tells me this, I'm in the hallway at like maybe 9 p.m. The barracks are T-shaped with the ice machine in the middle of the intersection. And if you're looking at the ice machine, on your right-hand side, there's a vending machine. As I'm standing there, filling my water bottle, I see a girl in the old Type 3 uniform sprinting down the hallway. I turn my head back and look down the hallway and there's no one there. I ran back to my room. I play some vidya and try to forget about it. Fast forward, I'm trying to go to bed when I suddenly feel the air get heavy. I do not know how to explain it any other way. I'm facing the wall in my bed with my back to the rest of the room, and I just intuitively knew that it was her, the girl that had been murdered. I remember telling her that she has to move on, and I heard her say, "You just want me to leave." "I am losing it." I said, "No, you need to forgive him and pass over." I don't know, bro. Next thing I know, the room feels like someone opened a window and the atmosphere got thinner. I completely forgot about this. I was also stationed in Yokosuka, Japan, and I worked at that military postal facility in Yokohama. This is a secured compound in an industrial area. You would never know it was there unless someone told you. Security system, barbed wire, etc. The building held hundreds of registered mail pieces at a time, classified materials. Anyway, I was on night shift that month, and that night it was just me and my Marine sergeant. We're in the break room watching some Netflix at like 1 a.m., when all of a sudden we hear footsteps above our heads. We both look up, look at each other, and immediately say, "Nah, fuck that." We both agreed to stay in the break room until sunrise. There was literally no way there was anyone else in the building with us. There's rumors that the building was a POW camp during WW2, but there's documentation of that online, so I don't know. The warehouse is 2 stories tall. Where the break room was, there was a floor of office space above us. The rest of the warehouse just had really high ceilings. Over by where the trucks backed up to, there is a door frame in the middle of the wall on the 2nd floor, where people told me there used to be a catwalk that the guard walked along. Dunno, man.
2011. Work at a gas cylinder and welding supplies shop. Also doing some fabrication during quiet times, gates, grills, etc. Guy comes into the shop. Can we go and look at his welders and teach some of his crew basic welding? Crew? Boss asks. Yay, it's on board a ship. I'd prefer not to, as I hate the sea, but wages are 3 times what I'd normally get, and so I volunteer. Ship is smaller than I thought. They take cargo from Scotland to Greenland. 3-week contract. I'm seasick every day on board, really hating it, but the crew are not a bad set of lads. After 2 weeks of going back and forth, I'm still sick but used to it after dinner time. One night, me and Greg, one of the crew, are sat in one of the cabins having a crafty beer. Alcohol was banned. Greg sort of absent-mindedly looks over my shoulder, out of a window, says, "What the hell?" I turn around and we both see a green light, slowly drop from the sky until it's about 100 foot over the sea. It stays motionless, probably for 5 seconds, then zoom straight into the ocean, straight down, out of sight. Greg and I were speechless, and he went off to see the skip. Last trip back, I got dropped off, as the crew are deemed good enough welders by now. The captain said not to take notice of Greg as he was not a full shilling, but the fact remains that I saw the green light. Started believing in the paranormal that very day.
I have deep thalassophobia. Dad is a fisherman, loves the sea. Dad's brother is also a fisherman, loves the sea and has a boat. One of my oldest memories is them giving me breaded meat, laughing and calling it special chicken. I complain it's rubbery, they laugh and reveal it's octopus. The house is filled with relics of the sea dead, and the soap holder is an abalone shell. Forced to watch them gut these monsters they pulled from the sea and dropped the least interesting parts out of their tinny for the gulls. Pelicans everywhere. Fishing paradise for them. I'm horrified by the entire experience. Anyway, they drive me to a random spot as a kid. They dump me on a random beach and drive off. "Follow us, buddy," they pull out laughing. Walk behind them trying to catch up. Realize my steps are all crunching. Wait a minute, what? Look down and realize there's a billion little holes over this beach. Step on sand, no crunch. Step over this crunch. You're weird, try to find mostly sandy places to step, but at a point everywhere is a hole. Every step crunches. It feels gross. I have that feeling of stepping on a snail that crawls up my spine. Whatever, I keep my eye on the horizon and try to follow my dad's pickup, that asshole. I suddenly got this really bad feeling, like something extremely heavy was underneath me. I stand still for a second, take the moment to rest, and squat down. Nothing changes. Nothing moves. I'm still for about 4 minutes until it happens.
I look forward, those assholes have completely taken off, trying to figure out how to get to them when I see the floor change. The entire beach floods with this strange, mottled color. I'm confused, then mortified. I realize it's little crabs. They're crawling out of the holes. Every crunch step I took was half-mashing a little crab while it was sitting, sleeping in its little tunnel. My dad is still maybe half a km away. There is nowhere to step except for holes. Eventually, I made my way to him after an hour. He had been fishing while waiting for me. Ever since then, I've had dreams. You can feel pain in dreams, just like you can feel physical pressure. You just can't feel immediate rushing things, which is why you can't punch someone. But several times a month, I have dreams of a seafloor. Maybe it's where I used to live, or sometimes a playground I knew as a kid. I'll find myself there shoeless and stumbling. I'll feel needles. Often I have to stop to pull hooked things out of my feet. Every surface is covered in this strange biologic nettle-like substance that appears as mold, but seems to creep towards me wherever I stand. Half-dead starfish and urchins. Once in a dream I realized I was chewing on one of them. What is that? Why does it hurt me so badly? I wake up and still feel my feet itching from the barbs on random dead fish that were lying on the ground. What sea god have I angered, and how to get it to stop?
Be me, Michigan resident. Kayaking in the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, about a quarter mile out from shore. Notice a massive fishing net. Decide to be a good Samaritan and dispose of it. Start cutting away at it with a pocket knife. There has to be at least 5 pounds of netting, fishing line, etc. Part of it is caught on something. Have to get in the water in order to cut it. Hop in. Water is frigid, but it's not bad. As soon as I cut the last bit of netting, I feel a rush of water go past my sides. Through the dark, murky water, I see that I just released a netted group of lampreys. They must have not eaten for a good few weeks. Feel a slimy tube swim between my arm and my ribs. Feel another between my legs. Suddenly, on my inner thigh, I feel a sandpaper material. Clink. Lamprey on my inner thigh. Feel it poking into my flesh. Rip the fucking thing off. At that moment, ploop, another one on my ribs. Feel it breaking the skin. Rip the fucker off. Hope into kayak. Scariest shit ever. It looked like I got a hickey from Satan.
Apparently, there's a phenomenon when you are working in the deep sea. In certain places where there is a steep drop-off into the abyss, divers report seeing sharks, orcas, tentacles coming at them out of the corner of their eyes. The mental stress is so damaging from working in these areas, nobody can handle it for more than a few hours at a time. There are also reports of divers suddenly swimming down into the deep for no reason at all and never resurfacing.
Any sources on that?
Well, yeah, diver here. You get delirious from nitrogen accumulating in your blood, which happens if you stay underwater beginning after 45 minutes. The effect worsens the deeper you are.
It's not just an illusion, too. If it's nighttime, fish and other creatures will be attracted by your light. They won't go up to you, but stay just out of range, but close enough that your instincts kick in with the "I'm being watched" feeling, as well as glimpses of things at the edge of your vision and light. I'm in a landlocked state that has a bunch of lakes. I wanted to take up scuba diving and got certified. Our lakes are generally brackish, muddy, with low visibility. Not creepy during the day, but fucking terrifying at night. I did my first and last night dive in a lake. Visibility was about 7 feet with my light. Due to sediment in the water, it was like you were in a giant fog bank. After a few minutes, I started to notice shapes just at the edge of my light. Shadows up to 4 to 5 feet long, just circling. I knew it was just fish, but it was still creepy as fuck. My hair tingling and a flight or fight response was on the whole time until I got out. No idea how divers just ignore that. My diving instructor used to live on the coast and do commercial diving in the ocean. He'd have a shark come in and bump into his tanks from behind, and he'd just ignore them.
A report dated 1953, made by an Australian diver working in the South Pacific, tells of something that may have been more familiar to the ancients and formed the source of a few of their best horror stories. Wearing the latest type of diving suit, the narrator had been testing it by trying for a depth record in the deep ocean. All the way down, I was followed by a 15-foot shark, which circled around full of curiosity, but made no attempt to attack. I kept wondering how far down he would go. He was still hanging around some 30 feet from me, and about 20 feet higher, when I reached a ledge below which was a great black chasm of enormous depth. It being dangerous to venture farther, I stood looking into the chasm while the shark waited for my next move. Suddenly, the water became distinctly colder. While the temperature continued to drop with surprising rapidity, I saw a black mass rising from the darkness of the chasm. It floated upwards very slowly. As at last light reached it, I could see that it was of dull brown colour and tremendous size, a flat, ragged-edged thing about 1 acre in extent. It pulsated sluggishly, and I knew that it was alive, despite its lack of visible limbs or eyes. Still pulsating, this frightful vision floated past my level, by which time the coldness had become most intense. The shark now hung completely motionless, paralysed either by cold or fear. While I watched fascinated, the enormous brown thing reached the shark, contacted him with its upper surface. The shark gave a convulsive shiver and was drawn unresisting into the substance of the monster. I stood perfectly still, not daring to move, while the brown thing sank back into the chasm as slowly as it had emerged. Darkness swallowed it, and the water started to regain some warmth. God knows what this thing was, but I had no doubt that it had been born of the primeval slime countless fathoms below.
I must have been around 15 when my grandfather took me out in his small boat to go fishing at night. It was in 1959 in Mauritius. Life was hard, but we were happy, and the sea was full of resources. Fishes, lobsters, crayfish, etc. And I enjoyed fishing. I still enjoy it. However, even though I shared the same passion as my grandpa, we were not the best friends. He was very harsh, sometimes abusive, mainly when he would drink, but I could make it with him. It was another story with my dad. Anyway, we took the sea in his small 24-foot boat with a heavy and noisy fuel engine at around 5 p.m. and had hoped to bring as much fish as possible by the end of the night. We left from a place called Albion, which is on the west coast of Mauritius. My grandpa used to work as a postman, but left his job to become a fisherman by passion. My dad took over his former job. The sea was calm and the air was slightly warm. Usually it means that it would rain, but the sky was fair and almost clear. We could see the stars and the moon came up after sunset. We reached the place my grandpa knew was full of fish and we started. We did not talk much, only when we needed something. We were not too far from the coast, maybe 3 or 4 kilometers away. We were in the open sea above what we call in French a haute fond. It's a part of the seafloor bed which rises close to the sea surface and where fishes come to feed. It's very fishy. We had been fishing for a good 4 hours and had caught a fair amount of fish. We did not realize, but the current had made us drift away and we discovered that we had been pulled quite far from the coast. Grandpa tried to start the engine, but it did not trigger. He tried again and again and again, but nothing happened. Fortunately, the sea had remained calm, but the swells were much bigger and quite scary. In those days, we were not equipped for security as we are today. No radio, cells, or life jackets. You had to fight for your life. The boat drifted another hour. We had stopped fishing and were trying to figure out what to do and what would happen. All kinds of dark thoughts got hold of me, and I imagined myself dying of thirst on the boat in the middle of the sea, or stumbling out of the boat rocked by a big wave and drowning in these dark waters full of scary creatures. Suddenly we started to hear music. It sounded like music from the 40s. We looked around and there was no boat or whatsoever. The coast was now quite far, maybe 7 to 8 kilometers, and it was impossible that music from the coast would be heard by us. The atmosphere was eerie. Then the sound of music became louder with the sound of people talking, exactly like it would during a cocktail. We tried to look for a ship, but there was none around. There was no mist and the sky was fair. We were even under the first or last quarter moonlight, which was now high in the sky. We started to panic. Now try to imagine what it is like to feel lost on the sea at night, plus starting to face spooky things. The cocktail sound became closer and there was still nothing around. Grandpa was fighting now against the engine to start it. The party sound stopped, and we could now hear whispers all around us. We hardly talked to each other, just looked at each other to understand that we were experiencing the same things. I could not understand what was being said, but there were male and female voices in the whispers. My stomach was so tight with fear that it was sore and my neck was hard like a stick. I felt like becoming feverish from fear. I got hold of the cable of the engine and pulled as hard as I could to start it. The whispers were becoming very scary and we had to leave that place. Suddenly the engine started and Grandpa pushed me back and grabbed the throttle. We shot straight to the coast, surfing on the waves. I wonder if Grandpa checked for reefs when coming back so much we wanted to flee this place. We eventually made it after almost an hour. The whispers had stayed behind. We were so scared when we reached the beach that we forgot all our fish in the boat. We came back in the morning and the fish had started to rot. We lost about 75 kilograms of fish that day and never got to know what we encountered. The strangest thing is that there are no known ships that were wrecked in that area, and no other fishermen experienced what we lived. Some have encountered weird animals, and others think they saw ghosts floating above the water, but not in the same area and nothing of the same nature.
Around 2010, halfway through my service, I was a Seabee, naval engineer, stuck on a ship that I won't reveal the name of. Spooky, spooky stuff out there on the water at night. If you have never been in the middle of the Pacific, no land in sight. You know you're miles away from anything, even just dirt. You've never known true isolation. The only thing that could have made it more unnerving would be to be alone. Anyway, like I said, at night, out on the open, empty waters, you'd hear things. Often explainable things like sudden, extremely loud splashes, probably a whale. It's just the boat, but sometimes more horrible, like one night when I heard what sounded like a really low, really loud whale call. But from what I understand, we cannot hear a whale call from outside of the water. On the other end of that spectrum, I once heard a long, drawn-out shriek. It wasn't a violent one, more questioning, searching, like it was looking for me. My friends and I joke that it was a siren trying to get me to come to the edge to look for it.
Why is the open ocean so unsettling and so comfy at the same time?
You can't see very far at all, but you know there are strange, nightmarish creatures in the depths below. Ancient creatures evolution hasn't touched in 250 million years, and fish that have been warped into strange, jagged shapes with pale, milky eyes like a corpse. It took decades to find a living giant squid because of their ability to avoid our observation. We don't know what creatures are out there that have never been seen by man. There may be some creature who has dwelt in the abyss for eons, never to be laid upon by human eyes. Really makes you wonder what the first deep-sea explorers thought of what they saw, and what they imagined they might see down there.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.